Hello everybody, welcome to number 27, and I'm here today in front of this lovely 308. This belongs to my friend Colin. It is a Ferrari 308, it's a QV, and it's in azzurro metallizzato, and does it not look amazing? I want to talk to you about James May's recent video. Now James, I absolutely adore. I think he's brilliant. He's an excellent presenter, he's got some great ideas, and he's recently announced to the world that he is selling his Ferrari 308.
My Ferrari isn't in this space because it's gone.
Now James is a very logical person and normally I agree with his views, but in this case I don't think he's been entirely truthful of the reasons why he is selling his 308. So I'm going to give you a brief summary of what he says, and then afterwards we're going to go through 3 points where I have some issues with what he's putting across. So James starts off by saying that this is a really incredibly pretty car, but that doesn't quite translate into the drive. He then goes on to say that it is not a car of its time, which, yes, I agree with. It's not really a car of its time. That's part of the appeal, but he sort of expands further, and we'll discuss that in a minute. His other point is that he doesn't really seem to like
old cars, old tech. It's an old car, old tech or anything old artifacts. The past has gone.
Old cars and or old things by the sound of it. Okay, so let's take James's first point.
I think the problem with driving old cars or using anything that has utility is that you can't really appreciate it as it was in its time.
This is not a car of its time, and in his view, it cannot be enjoyed because things have progressed since when it was built, which is undeniable. He goes on to make quite a strange sort of comparison between cars and music. And he starts talking about Bach and Mozart, and he says that nowadays there are things that we've experienced and music has evolved. So we have, for example, the Sex Pistols, and quite funnily we hear him talking about
rap and R&B.
And he says that you can emulate a 17th century concert, and you can put up the concert with the same music, you can put it up in an old building with candles, but ultimately you will never hear that concert in the same way as someone from the 17th century would have heard it at the time. Which is true, I guess, but in my mind, it's a really weird argument because, of course, listening to Bach and Mozart, even with more modern music, having heard more modern music, it doesn't mean that just because I don't experience it in the same way as someone of the time, it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it.
The idea of music has progressed, so we reinterpret Bach, say, or Debussy, or medieval music, or plain song. But you can't really reinterpret an old Ferrari because it is an old Ferrari and it drives like one.
So that's just, I don't know, it's a really weird comparison that he's making there. I think what he's trying to say is that, it won't wow you in the same way as it would have at the time in terms of power and handling. Part of the problem here is that, in actual fact, James he's doing 2 things with his video. He's telling everybody why he's selling his car, but at the same time he's actually trying to promote the car. And part of the video is actually a big promotion.
A rare right-hand drive, early steel-bodied carburettor model with the desirable dry sump. And it's now for sale at the Ferrari Centre in Kent.
He wants people to know his 308 is being sold, where it's being sold, so that anyone interested can go and buy it. And so he sort of dances elegantly around the real reasons why he's selling it, and he does hint at it. He says that it's an absolutely beautiful car.
Possibly one of the prettiest Ferraris ever made.
But that doesn't quite translate into the drive, and that it's beautiful to look at from the outside, but when you're inside driving it, you can't see it. What he really means to say, I think, is that he just doesn't like the way it drives, and he doesn't think it drives very well. But he can't be too scornful during the video because he isn't essentially trying to get people to buy the car at the same time, and he can't say it's an horrible handling old piece of crap and it looks nice, but that's about it. But that's what it comes down to, that he's actually doing. When he starts to talk about the golden age of the car,
I think the golden age of the car is always now. We're going through a golden age of the car now because everything is up for grabs, everything is being questioned, how it's used, how it's owned, how it's propelled.
I can kind of understand where he's coming from. In many ways, cars have never been better. They're better to drive than they ever have been. They're more accomplished. They're easier to drive for anybody. They use less fuel. They're lighter. They're faster. They have more grip. But ultimately, the enjoyment of a car, and I'm not going to go into all the old sort of classic car cliches about, you know, feel and all that kind of stuff, but some of the enjoyment of driving a car doesn't have to come with accomplishment. It's not really necessarily about how good it is. And a 308, I will acknowledge, is not always the best car in terms, even for its time, in terms of the way it handles or the driving experience. You have to be in the right place at the right time to get the best from it. He then goes on to say that for less money you could buy a Renault Alpine 1110, which is what he did. And I haven't driven an Alpine A1110, but I know from all the reviews and from people that I trust as well that it is an incredibly good car and very rewarding to drive, even though it's not, you know, even a manual, and I find any flappy paddle a little bit disappointing. But in any case, I know that they are good, and I'm sure that it is a brilliant car, and great on James for buying one, and I'm sure he will enjoy it ultimately, and that's fine. But I think where this argument starts to fall apart is that right at the beginning, where he says that he sold his 308, he says, I have sold my Ferrari.
I'm talking about the 308, not the Speciale. Obviously, I haven't sold the Speciale. That would be an absurd thing to do.
Oh, not the Speciale though. That would be a crazy thing to do. So hold on a second, James. So the golden era of the car is now, best car being the car of now, and you think that selling your Speciale would be a crazy idea because presumably you adore it and you think it's incredible. But yeah, it's not the most modern Ferrari, it's not the most up-to-date Ferrari. And also, are you telling me that in 20 years' time you will get no joy from driving that car just because in 20 years' time Ferraris will be electric, will be faster, will be cleaner, will be, you know, will grip more, will be faster around a track? You know, I don't think so. I don't think how good a car is to drive is necessarily linked to how good it is in comparison to other cars of the time. So another beef that I have with James on this is that he's obviously saying that it's not as good a drive as he would like. And one of the first things he did when he got the car is that he converted it back to the original 14-inch wheels.
Standard!
The 308s were designed to run on 14-inch wheels, and that's what they came with, I think, until 1980. From then onwards, Ferrari supplied them with the 16-inch wheels, which were an option. If you look around now, there's almost no 308s that come with the 14-inch wheels. Yes, I really like the way they look, actually. I think they suit the car because it's got a bit of that retro look, the tiny wheel with the balloon tyre, but there's a reason why they were all converted over. As standard, these are not the most precise steering things in the world. If you then take the wheels, 16 inches aren't exactly big wheels anyway, or super low profile, and you go to the original 14 inches with old tech Michelin XVX, I think they are, balloon tyres, that is just going to make the drive worse, not better. Yes, okay, it will make it probably a bit more compliant, but in a car that already isn't the most precise in the world, doing that is a retrograde step, and it's not going to make it any nicer to drive. So of course then he's saying, well, I don't drive it much, and you know, I don't enjoy driving it, and I don't really love it as much as I thought. And this is where we get to the nub of the question. Ultimately, for all the reasoned arguments that James tries to make about why he's selling this car,
A Rembrandt or a Jackson Pollock, we don't have 17th century ear. Bach, say, or Debussy. Or
it really comes down to the fact that he just doesn't like driving it and that he does think it's a crap drive. And I think that's a shame. And, you know, he goes on to say that, of course, cars like this should be preserved and looked at, but I don't totally agree with that. I love driving my car. I know Colin loved driving his. It may not be the most accomplished thing in the world, but you can get different types of rewards from a car like this than from the latest, you know, Ferrari, what's the latest one, the Tributo or whatever it's called. So I don't know, it's a bit of an odd one, and I understand that he was a little bit constrained because he wants people to buy the car, and at the same time he wanted to explain why he's selling it. And he does it in his typically humorous, fantastic way, and it's a great watch, and I'll put the link to his video in the description of mine. You'll probably have seen it already, to be honest, because it's got about 1 million views. I doubt that my video will turn you on to that, but all the same, it was an interesting thing to see. But tell me what you think. I mean, should we just put these, you know, on show and just never drive them again because they're a crap drive? Or should we actually use them, and can we have fun with these old cars, even though they're maybe not as good as some of the modern cars in some objective ways? Thank you all very much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and to my Instagram, the link is here. If you want to contact me, Instagram is by far the best way. So thank you all, and thank you, Colin, for bringing your wonderful QV. I'm going to have a good look around it now. Thanks, everybody.